Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Drop the knife, or I'll snap your pretty little wrist before you can even draw a breath. The voice didn't come from behind him. It seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves, deep, resonant, and vibrating with a lethal promise that froze Julian Vane's blood in his veins. He stood paralyzed in the center of the obsidian-tiled office, the stolen encrypted drive burning a hole in his pocket, his hand trembling as it hovered over the letter opener he had instinctively grabbed from the desk. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, turning the cityscape of Neo-Viridia into a blurred watercolor of neon blues and violent reds. But inside, the air was dry, cold, and smelled faintly of expensive sandalwood and imminent death. Julian didn't turn around. He didn't dare. He knew exactly who was standing in the dark corner of the room. He knew the sheer scale of the man, the legendary brutality that had earned him the moniker the Leviathan in the underworld and chairman in the boardrooms. I said. The voice rumbled again, closer now, the sound of heavy footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug. Drop it. The clatter of the silver letter opener hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot. Julian raised his hand slowly, his breath hitching in his throat. He was 22, nimble, and street-smart, but in this room, he felt like a child caught stealing from a god. Turn around. The command came. Julian pivoted on his heel, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. And there he was. Lysander Thorne. If the stories were intimidating, the reality was terrifying. Lysander was a mountain of a man, standing well over 6'4", his shoulders broad enough to block out the city lights. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that strained against the muscles of his arms and chest, the fabric struggling to contain the raw power beneath. His face was a masterpiece of cold, angular beauty, sharp cheekbones, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes the color of frozen steel. I can explain, sir," Julian stammered, his voice sounding pathetic to his own ears. Lysander stepped into the sliver of moonlight cutting across the room. He didn't look angry. He looked bored, which was infinitely worse. He walked past Julian, his sheer size creating a wind draft that chilled Julian's sweat-dampened skin, and sat on the edge of his massive mahogany desk. He picked up a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, swirling it gently. "Explain." Lysander took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving Julian's trembling form. "You break into my private sanctuary, bypass 3 levels of biometric security, which implies you had help from the outside, and attempt to steal the Ledger of Cain. And you want to explain?" "They have my sister," Julian blurted out, the tears finally spilling over. "The Vipers. They have Alara. They said if I didn't get the drive, they'd kill her." Lysander paused, the glass halfway to his lips. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "The Vipers," he mused, his voice dropping an octave. "Valerius and his lot of bottom feeders. Please, Mr. Thorne, you have everything. You run this city. I just need to save her. I'll do anything. I'll work it off. I'll be your slave for the rest of my life. Just let me take this to them." Lysander set the glass down with a deliberate clink. He stood up and moved toward Julian. The proximity was overwhelming. Julian had to crane his neck back to look him in the eye. The size difference was stark. Julian was slender, lithe, built like a dancer, while Lysander was built like a war machine. "You think giving them the ledger will save her?" Lysander asked, his voice deceptively soft. He reached out, his large hand encompassing Julian's entire jaw, tilting his head up. His thumb brushed over Julian's trembling lower lip. "Valerius doesn't leave loose ends, little bird. The moment you hand over that drive, you and your sister are dead. I have to try." Julian cried, trying to pull away, but Lysander's grip was iron. "You don't have to try," Lysander corrected, his eyes darkening. "You had to ask." Julian blinked, confusion warring with fear. "Ask. You used to call me Kuya when you were a boy, didn't you? Back when I sponsored that orphanage in Sector 4. Julian's heart stopped. He hadn't thought Lysander remembered. That was 10 years ago. Julian had been a scrawny kid, and Lysander had been the rising young don visiting his charity cases. Julian had worshipped him then, a crush that had bloomed into a painful, secret obsession as he grew older. He had tracked Lysander's rise, applied for a job as a lowly archivist at Thorncorp just to be in the same building, and now he was betraying him. I didn't think you knew who I was, Julian whispered. I know everything within my walls, Julian, Lysander murmured, leaning down, his face inches from Julian's. I know you stare at me when I walk through the lobby. I know you steal coffee from the executive break room because you like the blend I drink. And I know you've been in love with me since you were 12. The confession hung in the air, stripping Julian bare. He felt heat rush to his face, burning him. Sir, Shoo. Lysander's thumb pressed against Julian's lips. We will discuss your punishment for breaking in later. Right now, we have a pest problem to handle. Lysander released him and turned, walking toward a hidden panel in the wall. Keep the drive. We're going to pay Valerius a visit. Julian asked, his voice shaking. Lysander pulled a matte black heavy-caliber handgun from the wall safe and checked the magazine with a practiced, lethal grace. He turned back to Julian, a dark, predatory smile curving his lips. You stole from me, Julian. That makes you mine until the debt is paid. And nobody touches what is mine. The drive to the warehouse district was a blur of speed and silence. Lysander drove the armored sedan himself, weaving through the rain-slicked streets with the precision of a surgeon. Julian sat in the passenger seat, his hands gripping the leather upholstery, his mind racing. Why was Lysander doing this? The Iron Duke didn't do field work. He didn't rescue hostages. He sent hitmen. He sent lawyers. He didn't personally drive a junior archivist into the heart of enemy territory. Why? Julian asked quietly, breaking the silence. Lysander didn't look away from the road. Why what? Why risk yourself? You could have just sent security. Or let me die. You asked too many questions, Lysander grunted. He shifted gears, the engine roaring. Valerius has been a thorn in my side for too long. He used you to get to me. It's insulting. He thinks I won't notice a missing archivist. He thinks I don't value my employees. Is that all I am? An employee? Julian felt a pang of hurt he couldn't suppress. Lysander glanced at him then, a fleeting look of something unreadable, something hot and intense, flashing in his eyes. We established back in the office that you are more than that, didn't we? Or did you forget the secret I know? Julian flushed, turning his face toward the window. The rain distorted the neon lights into streaks of bleeding color. They arrived at the docks. The warehouse was a rusting hulk of metal against the black sky. 2 guards stood by the entrance, smoking under a flickering halogen light. Stay close to me, Lysander commanded, killing the engine. Do exactly as I say. If I tell you to run, you run. Understand? I'm not leaving without Alara, Julian said stubbornly. Lysander got out of the car, the rain instantly soaking his suit jacket, making it cling to his massive frame. He walked around to Julian's side and opened the door, looming over him. I didn't say leave her. I said run. I will handle the violence. They approached the entrance. Lysander didn't bother with stealth. He walked straight up to the guards. Before they could even raise their rifles, Lysander moved. For a man of his size, his speed was unnatural. He grabbed the first guard by the throat and slammed him into the metal wall, the impact knocking the man unconscious instantly. The second guard fumbled for his radio, but Lysander's fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crunch. Julian watched, wide-eyed. This wasn't the CEO he saw in magazines. This was a beast unleashed. Lysander adjusted his cuffs, unbothered. Inside, the interior of the warehouse was a cavernous space filled with shipping containers. In the center, under a spotlight, sat a chair. Tied to it was a young girl, looking terrified but unharmed. Alara! Alara! Julian cried out, sprinting forward. Wait! Lysander barked, but it was too late. As Julian crossed the threshold of the light, shadows detached themselves from the containers. Dozens of men, armed with pipes, chains, and guns, encircled them. And from the catwalk above, a slow clapping echoed. Bravo, a slippery voice sneered. Valerius stepped into the light. He was a thin, rat-faced man in a flashy white suit that looked ridiculous in the grime of the warehouse. I knew the boy would come. I didn't expect the king of the jungle to accompany him personally. Julian skidded to a halt near his sister, shielding her with his body. Lysander walked into the circle calmly, his hands in his pockets. He looked like a wolf surrounded by chihuahuas. "Valerius," Lysander greeted, his voice bored. "I see you're still wearing those tacky suits. Did you rob a magician?" Valerius's face twitched. "You're arrogant, Thorn. You think you're untouchable. But you're on my turf now. And I see you brought the little traitor. Does he have the drive?" "I have it," Julian yelled, pulling the USB from his pocket. "Just let her go." "Give it to me," Valerius demanded. "No," Lysander said. The single word cut through the air like a blade. Valerius laughed. "You're outnumbered, 20-1. You're not armed heavy enough for a war, Thorn." "I don't need a war," Lysander said, cracking his neck. "I just need 5 minutes." Lysander looked at Julian. "Cut her loose. When I move, you cover her eyes." "What?" Julian whispered. "Now." Lysander exploded into motion. He didn't draw his gun immediately. He grabbed the nearest thug, a man nearly as big as Julian, and threw him across the room into 2 others like he was a rag doll. The sound of bones breaking filled the air. Chaos erupted. Gunfire popped, but Lysander was a blur of motion, using the shipping containers for cover, closing the distance. He was a force of nature, a wrecking ball of pure aggression. He fought with a brutality that was mesmerizing and terrifying. He broke arms, shattered knees, and moved with a fluidity that belied his massive bulk. Julian frantically untied Alara's ropes. "It's okay, Alara, it's okay," he soothed, though his own hands were shaking. "Look out," Alara screamed. Julian turned to see a thug charging at them with a machete. He froze. A gunshot rang out. The thug dropped mid-stride, a hole in his forehead. Lysander stood 20 feet away, his gun smoking, his other hand holding a man by the throat off the ground. He dropped the man and turned his cold gaze to the catwalk where Valerius was trying to flee. "Stay here," Lysander commanded Julian. He holstered the gun and ran toward the metal stairs. The metal groaned under his weight as he ascended, hunting his prey. Valerius reached the roof door, but it was locked. He spun around, his face pale, to see Lysander blocking his path. "Please," Valerius shrieked. "We can make a deal. The territory, the routes. Take 50%. Lysander walked forward, grabbing Valerius by the lapels of his white suit and lifting him until his feet dangled over the railing, a 30-foot drop to the concrete floor below. "You threatened a child," Lysander said, his voice a low growl. "And you touched what belongs to me." "He's just an employee," Valerius screamed. "He," Lysander whispered, his eyes flashing with a terrifying possessiveness, "is my soul." Lysander didn't drop him. That would be too quick. He pulled him back and slammed a fist into Valerius's face, knocking him out cold. He tossed the limp body onto the catwalk. "Police will be here in 3 minutes. Enjoy prison, Valerius." Lysander descended the stairs, wiping blood from his knuckles, none of it his own. Julian was hugging Alara, both of them crying. When Lysander approached, Alara flinched, burying her face in Julian's chest. Julian looked up, his eyes wide, seeing the blood, the raw violence radiating off the man. "Is it over?" Julian asked softly. Lysander nodded. "My security team is outside securing the perimeter. The police are on my payroll. They'll collect the trash. Your sister goes to the hospital for a checkup, then to a safe house." "And me?" Julian asked. Lysander reached out. Julian flinched instinctively, then held his ground. Lysander's hand, large and warm, cupped Julian's cheek, his thumb wiping away a smudge of dirt. "You and I," Lysander said, his voice dropping to a husky timbre that sent shivers down Julian's spine, "have a long night ahead of us. You still owe me an explanation for the break-in. And a confession." "A confession? You said you'd do anything," Lysander reminded him. "You said you'd be mine." Julian swallowed hard, looking into those intense, steel-gray eyes. "I meant it." "Good." Lysander leaned in, his lips brushing Julian's ear. "Because I've been waiting 10 years for you to grow up and realize you belong in my cage." The penthouse was quiet again, but the atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer a place of impending death, but of suffocating tension. Alara was safe, escorted by Lysander's top lieutenants. Julian was back in the office, but he wasn't standing in the middle of the room anymore. He was sitting on the edge of the desk where Lysander had placed him. Lysander had shed his ruined jacket. His white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, revealing thick forearms corded with muscle and dusted with dark hair. He was cleaning a small cut on his hand with a wet cloth. "Does it hurt?" Julian asked, breaking the silence. "No," Lysander said dismissively. He tossed the cloth aside and stepped between Julian's spread knees. The position was intimate, overpowering. Julian felt small, fragile, and incredibly hot. "Why didn't you tell me?" Julian whispered. "Why did you let me struggle for years? Why didn't you just come for me?" Lysander placed his hands on the desk on either side of Julian, trapping him. He leaned down, his face level with Julian's. "Because the world I live in is dark, Julian. It's blood and oil and money laundered through filth. You were pure. You were the one good thing I remembered from a time before I became this monster." "You're not a monster," Julian argued weakly. "I just broke 14 bones in under 5 minutes without raising my heart rate," Lysander countered dryly. "I am a monster, but I stayed away to protect you. I thought if I kept my distance, you'd find a nice, normal life. A nice, normal partner." "I never wanted normal," Julian confessed, his voice barely audible. "I compared everyone to you. No one measured up. They were all so small. Small in spirit, small in presence." Lysander's eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide. "And now I know why," Julian said, reaching out tentatively to touch Lysander's chest. He could feel the steady, powerful thump of the man's heart beneath the shirt. "Because I was waiting for the big boss." A low chuckle rumbled in Lysander's chest. "Careful, Julian. Flattery will not reduce your debt." "How do I pay it?" Julian asked, his breath hitching as Lysander's hand moved to his waist, pulling him flush against the hard wall of his body. "The Vipers wanted the ledger," Lysander murmured, his nose brushing against Julian's neck, inhaling his scent. "They wanted my secrets." "You want to know my biggest secret?" "Yes," Julian breathed. "I'm insatiable," Lysander whispered against his skin. "And I don't share." Lysander kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming. It was hungry and demanding, tasting of whiskey and danger. Julian gasped, opening his mouth, allowing Lysander to deepen the kiss. The size difference was even more apparent now. Lysander's hand covered nearly all of Julian's back, holding him in place as if he weighed nothing. Julian wrapped his arms around Lysander's neck, his fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. He felt consumed, overwhelmed, and for the first time in his life, completely safe. Lysander pulled back, his lips swollen, his eyes burning with blue fire. "You have no idea," Lysander growled, his voice rough, "how much trouble you are in." "I think," Julian panted, a reckless smile touching his lips, "I can handle it. I've always liked a challenge." Lysander smirked, a wicked, predatory expression that made Julian's toes curl. He effortlessly lifted Julian off the desk, wrapping Julian's legs around his waist. Julian gasped at the sudden elevation, clinging to the broader man. "We'll see," Lysander said, carrying him toward the bedroom door. "By morning, you won't be able to say my name without shivering. That is a promise." As the heavy oak doors kicked shut behind them, sealing them away from the world, Julian knew 2 things for certain. First, he was never paying off this debt. And second, he never wanted to. And that is how the stray bird found its cage in the arms of the beast. If you enjoyed seeing the sheer dominance of Lysander as he claimed what was his, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a lover who used you as bait to catch a killer, even if it was to save you in the end? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Lysander, extremely tall and muscular, slicked back black hair, sharp cold eyes, wearing unbuttoned white dress shirt with rolled sleeves, dark vest, dominant aura, holding man 2's chin. Man 2. Julian, smaller frame, messy brown hair, teary eyes, blushing, wearing office worker clothes, looking up submissively, sitting on mahogany desk. Background is a dark, luxurious penthouse office at night. Rain on floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights bouquet, scattered papers, dramatic moody lighting, cinematic composition, intense eye contact, height difference emphasized.